good to see you guys. I tell you, I'm not used to performing in the round like this. I usually only have to suck it up if I'm turned sideways. This is going to be difficult the whole time. I went to my doctor I went for a checkup, but while I was there, I said, listen to my knee. Listen to that creaking. It's clicking, and I have a horrible doctor. This is what my idiot doctor says. He goes, oh, yeah, my dad's knee does that. Awesome. People would start saying, what's the secret to a long marriage? How do you stay together? Because a lot of marriages don't last. And I think a lot about it. And I've narrowed it down to a few things. I think, first of all, it's definitely quality time, because I make sure we have that, when we go out on date nights and stuff. And by the way, my wife is not picky. I know a lot of women can be picky where they go eat or whatever. My wife will go anywhere I want. It doesn't matter. She will. Her only rule is it can't be one of the first 7 places I suggest. Doesn't matter what it is, but as long as it's not one of
those. Hey, you guys. I'm Venus Monique from the hit crime drama Vindication. And you guys should definitely make sure you're catching the Maurice Brown Show on Roku TV.
Yeah! Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Maurice Brown Show. You were just watching a very funny gentleman by the name of Mike. My main man, Mike James, right there. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome a guy that is an in-demand, award-winning and nationally recognized comedian. He's written for The Tonight Show and Comedy Central, and his comedy has been featured nationally on both TV and radio. And as you just saw, he delivers a fresh and hilarious take on everyday life. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the very funny Mike James. What's going on, Mike? How are you?
Hey, Maurice. Good to talk to you. How are you doing?
Man, it's good to talk to you as well, my friend. I'll tell you one thing for sure is we are starting to emerge from the pandemic.
We are.
I mean, we're not clear yet, but we're almost there. We're almost there, and we're starting to get back into the comedy clubs. And I know you do the cruise ships as well, and all that type of thing. And I want to ask you, Mike. First of all, Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Things are, like you said, things are picking up. So yeah, there's a little bit less stress on the daily life financially and so forth. But things are kind of recovering from the last couple of years. So things are good. I'm doing well.
Yes. Amen to that, brother. So I wanted to ask you in regards to post-pandemic comedy, do you think that comedy is going to be different? And if so, will it be better?
I think it definitely is going to be different. And I think not necessarily because of the pandemic. Some of that is the case. And as a matter of fact, going through the pandemic, I think a lot of people, when we came out the other side of it, for comedians, yeah. I talked to a lot of comedians, and they have kind of the same story as I do, in that as I started to get back in and started, going back through older material and newer stuff that I'd rewritten or written new stuff, I kind of had a whole fresh take on a lot of it. And so, okay. And I think just taking that long break could have been helpful to a lot. I know it was hurtful to a lot, and I know there's some people that dropped out completely of doing comedy or live entertainment because of it. But I think overall it will be better. I think there are definitely things that are different that weren't necessarily because of the pandemic, just because of the political environment that has changed over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think what we picked up, like this show we're doing right now, is a result of the pandemic. Yeah. I mean, I did 25 of these pre-pandemic while I'm doing stand-up, going to different places, and I would interview a comedian, and then I would do their set, and I put my set on, and my son would do all of the mechanics of that. And after a while, I realized I can't do this. It's too much stuff. Yeah. It's just too much, and I just put it to the side. Pandemic hits, and I had nothing but time to zero in on this. And so a lot of comedians have come up with these type of shows. They're doing stand-up comedy online. I did that, didn't like it, and I still don't like it. I don't like doing stand-up online. No. But I will do it, and I have. But I just think that, it's different, and I think it's taking it to a higher level.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. And I think as time goes on, I think in our art form, at least, I think it always gets better over time. There's some big comedians, if you look way in the past, and and look at them, the things, people that changed the game. And I'm not going to use any names, but people that really, just were pioneers in comedy at the time.
Yeah.
If you look back at them now and really objectively watch and think, boy, they wouldn't do well today. That's just not the standard anymore. The standard has moved on. And I think that naturally happens as we move forward. So just in time moving forward, I think comedy will get better, despite all the hits it takes, despite, the overcorrection here and there and all of that. I think overall it still will get better. People flock to laughter.
Yeah. Well, they do. And that's all they want is for you to be funny when you do a show. I had comedian Nazareth on the show yesterday, and Naz was telling me how he started out as a profane comic, and he over time he found the Lord, and he changed over. This guy, look, Naz could have been on national TV with a sitcom easily. Could be in Hollywood, the whole nine. It was right there in front of him for the taking. And he decided to serve the Lord, and he does clean comedy, and I just respect the heck out of him for that. But people only care if you're funny. Now,
right.
if you're funny and you have a message, you're in position to deliver the goods, as it were. Yep. And that's all people want. They want funny. And as I say that, do you remember, Mike, the first time you realized that you were funny? Do you remember that?
I was one of those guys that in school, I didn't do well in school. I have ADD, like a lot of comedians. But back then this was in the 70s in grade school. People didn't know what ADD was. And I just, like a lot of people with that, I just thought, am I dumb? Am I just being too lazy? Why am I not getting it with school? But as a result, I struggled a bit in school. And so my go-to was just to make people laugh. I thought, well, if I can make people laugh, I'll be able to get through all this. And and I come from a big family, and in my family, sarcasm is huge, and just kind of, just we make fun of each other and make fun of everything. And so we laughed a lot at home. So when I was at school, I just kind of brought that to school, and I learned I could make people laugh at will. Pretty much whoever it was, I could get a laugh out of them. And that's when I kind of first thought that. I never expected to do comedy as a living. In fact, I didn't even start until I was in my 40s, as far as stand up and all of that. Yeah. So I started way late, but I knew way back then that making people laugh is something I wanted to do, whether professionally or not. That was what I wanted to be doing.
So I want to ask you this, which you may have answered it already, but I still want to throw it out, because there's a big leap from being a social funny in the break room at work, or at a party situation, or at a family gathering, to the stage. Those are two complete. And there are a lot of funny people in those situations. They're hilarious.
Yeah.
But if you put them up there, it's like not there. What motivated you, Mike, to go from that to getting on a stage and trying to make a room full of strangers laugh?
So about, I don't know, 15 or 20 years ago, I had my wife really was pushing me to do something more with comedy and stuff, as my kids were getting older and more independent, and they weren't out of the house quite yet, but they were, they were getting to that age. And she saw an ad in the paper for an improv troupe that was going to have auditions. Okay. And she, my only experience with improv was watching Whose Line Is It Anyway? I didn't know much more about it than that.
Yeah.
But she said, go try. And I thought, I'm not going to do that. And then a couple of weeks later, they posted another audition time. So I went in reluctantly, and despite my poor performance and audition, they let me join the troupe. I think they were pretty much letting anybody join it. And then about a week later, another guy joined, Brian Kohatsu. I think you've had on your show, but that's when we first met, and we just kind of bonded. So then I started to really grow in comedy and performing stage comedy and stuff. It was all improv. A few years after that, I decided I wanted to try to do stand-up comedy, and it was really just kind of a bucket list thing. I thought, I got to try this at some point. So I got some people together. That other people that were interested in doing this. Some had done it once or twice. Most of us hadn't. We just got together every week for a few weeks, and then decided to put on a little show, and we did that. And and it worked. But you're right. There are so many people that are funny socially in social situations, and they can be people that, bring tears to your eyes and laughing because you know them. And if you've ever been to an open mic, well, most open mics, you'll know that that does not always translate well to stage.
No, it doesn't. It does not. I'll kind of fast forward a little bit, because those kind of people, not in every case, and maybe not even in most cases, but when you think about hecklers, those are the guys that wish they were up there. That's why they heckle, because they don't have the guts to get up there.
Yeah, that's true.
And you know what I mean? And so they kind of like, they're funny at their table, and and they're jerks usually as well. And then they start to attack the comic on stage. And that's not every case, but in some cases. But I think that people look at it as, I can be funny because I'm funny at work. No, you can't.
Right.
You can't. I mean, and that's not to make that sound like an arrogant statement, but dude, it takes a while.
It's a different discipline. Yeah, you're right. It does. It takes a long time, and it's a totally different discipline. You're lucky if you happen to be a funny guy socially, and you learn the skill and discipline to do it well on stage.
Yeah,
but they're completely separate things. It's like saying, I'm really good at hanging wallpaper, so I should be a great excavator. Well, no, you might be able to do both, but one doesn't lead to the other.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It does not. And that's one thing that people don't get. But I think for the most part, most people respect what we do, and they would never try it. They know that's a high wire act, and they're not going to try that. Most people understand
that's for
it.
Sure.
But that being said, churches, comedy.
Yeah.
In this day and age, I think my personal opinion is we're starting to see more churches willing and more open to have comedy in their churches. Would you agree with that? What do you think the state of affairs are with that?
I totally agree with your assessment. I think it's a slow process, and for good reason. Churches are a little nervous to bring somebody on that's going to do comedy, because the nature of comedy and what you see out in the public and in the media normally is, well, that's not appropriate for church. But I think because there have been at least a handful of great, clean Christian comedians out there that have kind of opened the door to that, where churches can say, well, I know there's such thing as good Christian comedy, so maybe I can do that. But I do think it's definitely more open than it was. The pandemic, of course, set us back a little bit, where people were more nervous to have comedy corporately or whatever. But as churches are regathering, I think we're gonna see a resurgence in that pretty quickly, because I know just myself performing at churches, it's a little easier to get in the door now than it was just a couple years ago.
I think churches in general are a little bit too tight when it comes to comedy. It's like, hey, everybody lighten up. These are just jokes. Now, of course, there are lines you don't cross when you're in a sanctuary or in a church setting crowd. But at the same time, you got to, loosen up too, and understand that, these are jokes, and we all are human, and we have the same encounters with life that everybody else encounters and fails at. And it's funny. And I just think there's a difficulty there for churches to separate the two. But I do think they're starting to kind of loosen up and understand, hey, look, life, how are we going to witness to the world if we can't be real with ourselves?
Right.
I
agree. And making fun of yourself and kind of laughing at ourselves, and I think is a big part of that, because that's part of being real with ourselves.
Yeah.
And recognizing, hey, look, some of these things we do, the world looks at this and thinks that's silly, and here's why, and so I think you're right. I think that just being able to show the world that, Jesus was about happiness and joy and being fulfilled. And that doesn't just mean somber, deeply reverent thought all the time. He wants you to smile.
He does. I think there's something about laughter being like a medicine in the Bible.
Oh yeah.
So, it's just something that we have to understand about that. Excuse me, Mike. I get a lot of weirdos that call me from time to time on Facebook. Anyway, but anyway, Mike, that being said, no, it's like, look, we got to loosen up and understand that, it's not that serious. We got to be able to laugh at ourselves. God loves to laugh. God is the number one comedian. I mean, if you read the four gospels, Jesus gets off some good ones. So yeah,
oh yeah,
that's nothing wrong with laughing. Now, you mentioned open mics a moment or two ago.
Yeah.
And I've been doing comedy for 10 years, so I'm the type of guy, I'll go out to an open mic with no problem and work on new material. It's kind of painful sometimes because the guys that you're working with, but you got to be prayed up when you go in those environments. How do you feel about working open mics to stretch your material?
Oh, absolutely. Before the pandemic, I was very busy. I was doing a lot of gigs, and so I didn't really put a lot of effort into going to open mics to work on stuff, because I was kind of working things out in other gigs, and I was able to expand that way. But as we're getting back, as things have started back up and they're not quite up to speed, I've kind of rediscovered a love for the open mics that I used to have a long time ago. When you first start, you love them because that's all that's available, and you're just craving all that stage time. So anytime you can get out there. But I started to kind of get back to that. I'm like you. I don't like the environment, and it would be very difficult for me to find somebody at an open mic that I felt like, oh, here's a kindred spirit, or here's somebody like me.
Yeah,
because that's very rare. Most of them are it's pretty well, you know what it's like. And so anyway, but I found I really like going out to the open mics and being not afraid to bomb, which a lot of it is. It's new material. It's also not in the same vein as most of the stuff they're hearing that night. It's more, observational stuff, maybe even Christian stuff that's mixed into it. And they may not be loving that because they're waiting for the next, joke about bodily fluids or whatever.
Yeah.
But so that audience isn't ideal for it, but I still love it. I love working the material out. I love the challenge of trying to get them to laugh at stuff that's, not disgusting. And and it's the only time I can really work on really whole new bits. Most of the stuff if I am going to add a new material into something, it's usually an extension of a bit I already have, or a new tag or something like that in a corporate show or something where I'm being paid to do it. So I don't usually put in whole new bits and material on one of those, because I feel like that's not what I'm being paid for.
Well, I totally agree with you. And one of the things that I've learned about those environments, it's a great challenge to, like you said, can I get these guys to laugh? Because the demographic in most open mics is 25 to 30. Yep. You don't see a lot of old guys like ourselves in those mics. You don't see it very often at all.
Right.
Every now and then I have a comedian friend or two that, is like 65 or 70. And, they're wild cards, man. But anyway, that being said, if you can get them to laugh, you can get anybody to laugh, because they can't relate really to what you're talking about a lot of times. But if they get the humor, if you can get them to laugh, okay, I got something that I can take in front of a real audience. And I build it that way. But my wife can't stand, like, she used to go with me to these mics, and they're so bad. She said, look, Maurice, I'm never going to go into these type of rooms with you again. Yeah. I support you, but I'm not going in there. So I get it. I'm like you, Mike. I like it because I get a chance to work, and I get a chance to witness to these kids and be a positive influence on them in some kind of way. I have no problem doing it now. Since the pandemic has hit us, and I'm back out there, I'm a little bit more hesitant to go, simply because it's like, I know my wife's not feeling it, and I just kind of don't do it that much. And I'm just getting back on my feet, to be totally honest with you.
Yeah, I hear you. It's funny, during the pandemic, I still worked a little bit at the beginning, and we kind of had here in Arizona, at least, there was kind of the lockdowns and things kind of let up, and then they re-locked down. But during that time, I was kind of working. So but boy, that last year where things were just really tight and locked down, I didn't work at all. And I'll be honest, after a while, I started thinking maybe I won't do comedy anymore. I've kind of lost my fire for it. And it's because I wasn't doing it, but I
Yeah.
was just starting to
Yeah.
lose my
Right.
passion for it
Right.
entirely.
Yeah.
And wasn't until things opened up, and I needed to get out there because I needed money, and I needed to, that was a big part of our income. And so I did get back out there as I was trying to mulling over what else I was going to do. And, it just took 2 minutes for me to have that fire reignited. And,
Yeah.
and so now it's, right back to where it was as far as my desire to keep going and get better. Yeah.
I'm going to go out next week and get some work in. The name of the game is being in front of people performing. Often.
Absolutely.
That's the name of the game.
Yep. Yep.
And you can lose fire that way. You can lose a lot of things if you don't get out there. So you got to force yourself to stay out front and center. But like I said, I'm just getting back into it since the pandemic ended. It's not over, but it's ending. I would say It seemed like things are getting back to normal. So demographics, Mike. Are you the type of guy that can perform in front of any demographic and willing to do so, or do you have a specific audience?
I am somebody willing to perform in front of anybody. I will not do well in front of anybody.
Okay.
I'm willing to try. So actually, I would say the one demographic that really makes me nervous is real young people. I mean, like, teenagers and up to, early 20s and stuff, just because I feel like they don't relate well to the kind of life experience I have. And it's hard for me to relate. So in fact, if I have shows for that, I try to convince them to convert it to an improv show, and I'll bring one or two of my improv buddies and we'll do that because it's sillier comedy and it usually engages them a little bit better. But having said that, years ago I had a great opportunity in that one of the great bookers out here, he wanted to bring me on to put me out in front of retirement communities. Now these aren't nursing homes and things, they're just like active adult 55 plus communities.
Yeah.
And I did a whole ton of them. And it was a little struggle at first, but I learned to love that audience and I learned to get really good in front of that group.
Okay.
So right now I would say that's probably my best audience is that kind of 55 plus. But, most of my work outside of that has been just adults, probably, I would say probably the demo of 30 to 70 would be ideal for me.
Yeah.
But again, I'm willing to work in front of anybody, and I think I'm pretty good at making any group laugh pretty well. But obviously, there's specific demos that I do better with.
I was talking with Bone Hampton. I don't know if you're familiar.
Oh yeah, I know Bone really well.
Before Bone became ill, and we're going to keep him in prayer, keep him lifted up in the name of Jesus Christ, that he recovers 100% from what he's battling right now, health wise. Bone's a great guy. Yeah. Hilarious guy. I mean, the dude he's just always popping. And he shared a story with me once about Thor Ramsey. Have you ever met Thor?
Yeah.
So he told me that he was doing an urban room, which is a black room. And Thor went up to perform. And this is when he clicked with Thor Ramsey, like, I got to know that guy. And they became great friends. They are great friends. But he said Thor Ramsey went up there as white dude as any white dude could ever be, and he killed.
Yeah.
He killed. And he said, that guy right there is an example of what comedy is all about. Just be yourself. Listen, man, people could care less what color you are, what country you're from, what language you speak, if you're big, fat, tall, skinny. Are you funny? And the only way you can do that for real, Mike, is to dig down within yourself and pull out what you see as funny and then be it with no excuses. Don't turn back, be that. And that's what people respect.
I totally agree. I totally agree with you. In fact, I was going to relay a story to you, and this is going to sound like I'm stereotyping a little bit, but it was at a Black Baptist church, and predominantly Black, and that was probably one of my favorite shows ever because these people laughed harder than I've ever seen people laugh.
Wow!
When you struck a chord, they laughed and laughed hard, and they just weren't worried about that. And it kind of the nature of the kind of church it was in, as far as much more hand raising and vocal as a lot of those churches are, as far as Baptist or whatever. But then this particular one, they just love it. So it was a really fun show, really great time.
Yeah.
And but you're right. If you're funny, it's gonna work, and it doesn't matter. And if your race or gender or whatever does matter, then that's probably not a crowd that is ideal to perform in front of. But that's on the crowd. That's not on you. If you're funny, that's all that really matters. And I think that's been proven over and over in this industry. Nobody cares about your socio-dynamic background. It is just how good are you? How funny are you?
I did a show I don't know if you're familiar with Brad Stein or not.
Oh yeah, I know Brad. Yeah.
Brad and I did a show, but this is way back, like in 2012 or something. And I had invited Brad to headline a show that I produced. And we had never met. We had talked on the phone and so forth. And so when we finally met each other, Brad was like, "My God, you're black." Dude, it was so funny because we went to the show and it was a black room, right? And he had in his mind a set for Republican, shoot 'em up audience or whatever. It's really funny. Anyway, he was bombing for like the first 30 seconds.
Oh.
And he did a pivot, and for the next 30 minutes he slayed. And I watched it. I went, wow, that was utterly amazing. He didn't, mind you, he didn't try to be black. I'm going to be black now. No, he just kind of made a pivot to a different avenue of comedy and presentation. But he was still the same guy. He just went down another street and he killed it. And I thought, wow, that's what a pro does.
Yeah. I think Brad's particularly good at it because a lot of what he does tends to be political and kind of ranty to a degree. And, and if that audience isn't buying that, he's got to know how to shift into something else. Yeah. Because it could be a little divisive. I think he's great. And I remember the first time I saw him actually was at a Promise Keepers event so long ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And he, I was cracking up, but it's funny because I looked over to one of my other brothers out there and I looked over to him and he just didn't look real happy. Later I was talking to him. He goes, I just felt like he was being divisive and, whatever. And I thought, I get that. And he was kind of, but like I said, he needs, because he's Brad Stein, he needs to know how to pivot.
Yeah.
He's good at it. Yeah.
Oh, he is hilarious. Brad Stein is absolutely hilarious. I haven't seen much of Brad lately. I need to try to contact him. But when I witnessed that, I learned something about comedy because I asked him later, I said, man, how did, I'm glad you did it. I mean, but how did you come out? Because dude, he was going down. And he turned it back up. He got the nose of that plane up, dude, and it was clear sailing after that. He said, look, Maurice, and at the time it was 2012. He said, look, Maurice, I've been doing this for 17 years. I've seen just about everything.
Yeah.
And I went, wow. And you never stop learning in this business, Mike.
That's for sure.
You never stop learning in comedy. Jerry Seinfeld, to this day, my gosh, he still does open mics in New York.
Yeah.
And he said they'll give him, when he comes out, they'll go, oh, it's Jerry Seinfeld. And they'll give you a break for the first two jokes just because you're who you are. They're going to laugh. You're Jerry Seinfeld. After that, hey, all right, guy, we be funny now.
Especially in that environment, those clubs are used to seeing big stars coming out. Jerry's on the top of it all. He's the biggest
100%
probably ever. But he, but you're right. It'll buy you a minute. Now, if you go to a Chris Rock show or a Jerry Seinfeld show, that whole audience is there because they love you no matter what. Well, and you're going to get a little bit more leeway there. But but you're right, at a comedy club or something like that. Yeah. Wow. Jerry Seinfeld. Yeah. Even if I don't get that first joke, I'm going to kind of laugh along because I don't want to feel stupid. After that, you better bring it because
you have to bring it.
Yeah. I agree with you.
You 100% have to bring it. And I just think that that's the thing about comedy. Just be open to the fact that, hey, this is a night. I mean, you're not guaranteed to do well every night, even if you're really, really good. There are nights where, you could bite it. But that being said, I want to continue this conversation. We're going to take a 60-second break. Mike will be right back.
Okay.
We've got some fresh new young talent doing some things that I know you haven't heard before.
1, 2, 3. Listen,
brother, listen. Rising comic. You got Zachary. All he has to do is say, "Yo, stop, Zachary." Okay, are you Nancy? You say, "Oh, you already know." That's the most gangster thing I have heard all day, nigga. So you work downtown? Is that all you gonna give me, or we gonna? Okay, that's cool. You know what I mean? Like, I'm still gonna be up here 15 more minutes just staring at you. Nothing to do. Wait real hard like you're having a seizure, all right? You homestead, man. You ain't gotta say nothing out loud. Don't hold his arm. Don't hold his arm, first lady. He all right. Beautiful place during the day. Nighttime, gotta lock the doors. He got married, then married again. Is this how y'all do it homestead? Y'all just take it like, I'm only kidding. You don't have to come up. Sip some water and just leave it up there for people. They said, no, hablo inglés. He said, comedy show. Yes. I said, God can turn your life around. He did it for me. He turned my life around 360 degrees. Okay, some of y'all need to go back to math class. Y'all like, what's the problem with that?
Yeah, those were my good buddy Kayson Wilson. I don't know if you've ever met Kayson Wilson.
I haven't.
He is absolutely hilarious. And Martin Amini was also up there. He's going to be in Austin, Texas in later on next month. Very funny young man. And then my son was also up there doing some stand-up. He's a bright young comic at 23. And so that's what I used to do before the pandemic. So I'm getting that going again. I'd like to have you on one of those shows, Mike.
I'd love to,
the next show that I book. I just want to say to you, Mike, that we were talking about how difficult comedy can be, and you're always learning. You have to be open to learning because anything can happen up there. But
Sure.
What's the biggest thing about comedy that you have learned since you've been a part of it? That because we have these moments or these experiences or these times or these shows where you saw something or something happened or whatever, and it took your game to an even higher level. What's the biggest thing that you've learned since you've been doing stand-up that's made you better?
I think this happened actually pretty early for me, but still, I'd been doing it a few years. I'm still trying to figure out how, who am I on stage and this whole thing about your persona and all of that. And it was when I realized, for me, and I know that's not necessarily true for everybody, but I think for the most part, for most people, it's true. Certainly for me, it was figuring out, I just need to be me. I need to not try to be a character on stage or have this persona that I don't have. When I embraced being who I am, that's when I realized this. First of all, it made it easier to write and be and do everything. Yeah. But also, it just kind of freed me up to be, hey, I don't have to have this facade. It's funny. Early on, I got advice on you got to find your persona. You got to find your stage personality and your, who you are on stage and who you are as a comedian. And it's not necessarily bad advice, but it was the advice I really needed was, allow yourself to be there and see how that works too. Because for me, that made the biggest change as anything else, aside from, getting some breaks and getting a lot of stage time every once in a while. But as far as personally, for me, it was be yourself.
And I think that's hugely important. Number one, be yourself. And then there are a lot of other mechanics to comedy that, have to be also working as you stay within who you are. Sure. And it's about pitch. Comedy is like singing. There's a melody. There's this song that goes with your delivery. Jerry Seinfeld has talked about it many times. There's a pace, there's a pitch that you have to be in a certain kind of rhythm in your delivery of the joke. There has to be a certain level of precision with the delivery of the punchline. Leanne Morgan, for example. I don't know if you're familiar with Leanne Morgan or not.
Yeah.
She has this melodic pitch. It's just hilarious. She doesn't even have to make a joke.
Yeah.
She's just got this pitch That is all her. It's not made up. It's not a facade. She can't make it up. It's Leanne Morgan. But that melody of the way she presents herself is beautiful, and it's hilarious, and she's got it down to a science. Seinfeld, he's got it down to a science. If you look at the great comedians, they have Rodney Dangerfield was like that. There's a certain melody to the way they hit their punchlines, the way they set it up, and the whole nine. And you don't want to get in your head too much, because all these different things you learn, and they're helpful. But you, at the end of the day, you got to start with what you said: be yourself. But it's all about that pitch, man. I'm telling you, there's a melody to this.
I think you're right, and I think just that kind of rhythm of how you deliver and everything.
Yeah.
It actually trains the audience as to here's when I listen, here's when I laugh. I know that sounds clinical and sanitized, but it really does do that, and it actually buys you a little bit of leeway. Where if you say something that might feel a little bit more like, they'll know he's kidding. That's where the punchline comes.
Yeah.
You can also use it for just an expression on your face, because it's beat punch, and during that punch, if it's an expression, they know that's part of the joke. That's part of what I'm getting fed. But I totally agree with you. It's so interesting to watch different comedians, and if you can get in tune with really good ones, if you get in tune with how they're delivering it, and that rhythm, and that kind of orchestrated way that they deliver it, it's fascinating. But it also makes it fun to watch, because you're like, okay, here we go, and now.
Shonda Pierce is another one.
Yeah, you're right. She's exactly like that.
That's
actually like that when you talk to her too.
Man, I mean, there are some people, dude, they just have it. They don't even have to. I don't even think they have to try that hard. I mean, there's still a certain level of mechanics on the stage that you have to employ and know how to employ. But, by and large, some people just have it, man. They just open up that mouth, dude, and it's just hilarious. But, and I just learned that it's got to be pitch. Bombing is a part of the game, Mike.
It is.
It's an unfortunate part of the game. What is your worst bombing experience, Mike?
Oh, boy. Early on, I certainly had my share, and I don't remember them all because they were much more frequent back then. But, one of them that really stands out to me was I was doing a show for a community festival thing. It was I don't know, gold mine days for some town or something, one of their big annual events. It was outside, and they hired me to come out, and I was out there with Brian Kahatsu. He and I both went, and before we went, the stage, first of all, was a flatbed truck outside.
Oh, wow.
There was some seating set up in front of it to watch comedy, but most of the people are milling about. They're at like a carnival setting.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's a tough gig. That's a tough
set up. Yeah. It was, so we knew it wasn't going to go great, but there was these Native American dancers up before us, and they were, with the big headdresses and all this, and they were doing their thing. And then they came down, then I went up on stage, and so at that point, the very few people that were in the seats left. There was one guy that stayed back, and he was just there to have a good time. And so we started in, and I started up with my material, and he was laughing. Yeah. And every once in a while, somebody kind of stop and kind of and then walk on. It was just awful. Also, the microphone cord was about 6 feet long.
Yeah.
And it was touched to the corner of this stage.
Yeah.
So it couldn't go very far.
Yeah.
And there was, to power it all, was a gas generator running right there. So it was
just loud. Gosh, dude.
So it's just all set up horribly. And then I remember as I was coming off stage, these Native American dancers were coming back on, and the guy that appeared to be the head of them all, he just said, "So what are you, just goofing around up there?" Yeah, pretty much.
Oh man.
That's one of them. Yeah, that definitely was one of them.
That's a tough deal. It's part of the game, dude. I mean, you cannot avoid bombing. If you really want to be good at this, you're gonna have to suffer through those. Some do it more, suffer more than others, but everybody does.
Oh,
And
sure.
I don't care who you are. It's just going to happen. You got to learn how. Now, when it does happen, are you one of those people that, well, first of all, what did you learn from that experience? Did you learn anything in particular?
I did. Like I said, I'd bombed plenty before that, but
Yeah.
I was starting to do much better and things weren't so bad. And, bombing for me was just such a stomach ache. I just thought, "Oh, I don't want to do bad. And, I know if I wasn't doing well, my mouth would dry out and I just this isn't great.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
After
Yes.
that, I realized it's okay. If things aren't going great, it's okay. And
Yeah.
I can't say, I mean, my whole attitude changed entirely from that one time, but it really helped move me into a position where now if I go into a situation where I think this just isn't ideal for a comedy and it's not going to go well,
Yeah.
I'm okay with it. I'm going to do my best. I'm going to do my delivery. I'm going to try the best I can to make it whatever I can make it. And so that's the one thing I learned from bombing in general, I guess, is that, yeah, it's every once in a while that's going to happen. And hopefully it happens less and less often as you get better. But no matter what, there's going to be a situation where it just isn't working right.
How do you bounce back from those experiences, Mike? Are you the type of person that will brood over it for a while and try to dissect and study and figure out what did I do wrong? How can I fix it? Or you're the type of person that's like, it's just a bad day at the office and keep it moving?
I on the surface am one that goes, well, that's okay. I will do better next time. Internally, I dwell on it and I think, should I be doing this? I really second guess the whole world based on it. There are some situations like that where I know that's not the norm and that was the situation and nobody could have done well there. But there are times where I feel like there's nothing. Everything was set up for me to succeed and I didn't, and I don't know why. Yeah, and so I start going back over it in my head and all of that. But I know a lot of comedians, and I'm sure you do too. Anybody who knows comedians in general knows some that will have a bad set and they're just in a massive depression for days or weeks even.
Yeah.
And that's certainly not me. I don't get that wound up about it, but I do try to learn from it. I don't know that I'm great at learning from it. I every time I do, I think, well, that's the last time I'll bomb.
I mentioned I mentioned that I had comedian Nazareth on the show yesterday, and he had a great analogy about winning and losing on stage. He said when he realized that he was funny, it's like being on a bungee cord, and it's euphoric. You land and you bounce, and man, what a great feeling! But the thing the rope could snap. And that's the bombing part of it. You know what I mean? You're always risking the fact that the cord will snap, and I think that is the biggest thing about it. I think for me, I bombed so badly one. I mean, it was the bombing of bombings, and my family was there. My wife and kids were there, and I went, wow. I mean. But the one thing, because my wife didn't think I could recover, and my kids felt really bad for me. But at the end of the day, what kept me going was, it's like, well, but I'm coming back tomorrow. There's no question about it. I don't care how bad it may go. I'm coming back, and that's when I learned that I wasn't going to turn back. I hate to say this. I wish it hadn't happened because it was self-induced. Like I pushed the envelope in a crowd that I shouldn't, in a church crowd. It was funny. And I just we can't help ourselves as comics. We're always trying to push the envelope. Will this work? Can I get away with something? I think that's the way I'm wired. And I pay for it sometimes. And this time I really paid for it. But I said, okay, lesson learned, never do that again. Let's go on to the next one. And so that kind of helped me, understand, I'm going to keep doing this. But I had a friend of mine had to go see a therapist.
Oh, wow.
It was so bad. He had to go see a therapist.
Yeah.
So you're right. I mean, it's some people take it really bad, but it's part of the game, and, at the end of the day, the intestinal fortitude will bear itself out. Is this for you? You will find out if it's for you, if you can take it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because I love Naz. I've never heard that story from him, but I love that idea of, a comedian, somebody who can have that great experience on the bungee cord.
Yeah.
And on the off occasion that cord snaps and he hits the rocks.
Yeah.
The comedian's somebody that is going to have to go back up and do it again.
Yeah.
And most people would say, well, that's the end of doing that. if they even survive it at all. But it's comedian. There's something in it. For most of us as comedians, there's just something in it where we have to do that.
We have to do it. That's when you find out if this is for you.
Yeah.
If you can withstand that,
and
say hey, that hurt, but I'm going to dust myself off, and I'm coming back. It's
right.
and it wasn't even a question. And you did mention Crossroads. Tell us a little bit about that. It sounds like you've had a Crossroads experience. What was that like, and how did you get out of that situation?
Well, I think are you talking about just the idea of where I was headed, and then when I made a turn in my comedy?
Well, yeah. It's like, have you ever had that moment where you were like, I don't know if this is for me?
Oh yeah. It's happened a couple of times. One was during the pandemic, but that was just because of lack of stage time and forgetting how it fed me. But prior to that, there were times where I did poorly enough where I just thought, or even heading to a gig where I was, hired to do something cross country, and I'm flying out and going through all this to get out there to do this gig.
Yeah.
And as I'm getting there, I'm thinking, this still happens to me to this day. As I step foot on stage, oftentimes the thought that runs through my head is, why are they going to listen to me? What on earth am I'm not an expert in anything. But you just get that feeling. But I've had those experiences where I'm just during the process of getting to the gig and all of that, where I start to just really question the validity of, did they misunderstand what I said, and that's why they hired me, or do they are expecting something way better than what I'm going to be able to deliver? All of that, and it's just, it can be and those are the times where I thought, I'm going to do this thing because I committed to it, but I think I'm going to be done. It's causing too much stress and too much angst in me. And to be honest, the thing that got me past it is doing it and then realizing, well, I got to keep going. This is what, and honestly, it wasn't when I first started, but shortly after I first started, I realized that was the first time I felt like, you go through all these exercises as a Christian to what is God calling you to do, trying to find out your calling, find out God's will for you, and all these things. And I think what we really need to do is experience life as much as you can. And when it comes, you'll know. And it was after doing comedy is when I first realized God wants me to be in front of people and make them laugh and let them see, what it can be to be a Christian and have fun and laugh and bring joy. And that's one of the first time I felt like I was being called. So that's what brought me back. That's what saved me a million times is my sense of, no, God has said, do this, and I'm going to keep doing it till he says, don't do it anymore.
I heard an NBA referee say before the NBA finals years ago, he said, if you're not nervous before an event like this, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
And Bob Newhart, years ago, I heard him make the statement, even at 90, I don't know how old Bob Newhart is, but he said, even at 90, and Bob Newhart is one of the greatest.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
He said, I still get nervous. So that never goes away. You know what I mean? It's like that feeling of anticipation, the butterflies. It's like you're getting ready to get into a fight. You're getting ready to jump over 20 cars as Evel Knievel, whatever it is. That's part of the joy and excitement of being a stand-up comic.
It is.
And if that ever leaves you, like the NBA referee said, there's something wrong with you. That's when you need to find another line of work.
Yeah, exactly. A rodeo rider knows there's a good chance he's going to get, stepped on. And that's not why he's not doing it to get stepped on. He's doing it because of the thrill of the ride. But if there weren't that danger of getting stepped on, he probably wouldn't be there either.
I had a comedy buddy of mine get on stage once, Mike, and bomb. He jumped off the stage, ran to the bathroom, and cried his eyes out. Bawled like a baby. And I think another comedian was in the bathroom, a very good comedian, seasoned comedian, was in the bathroom and said, hey, man, get it out of your system. Calm down. It's going to be okay. And I'm going to give you some pointers, but it's part of the game.
Yeah. It really is.
But it can be no one can ever understand this stuff unless they do what we do, Mike. You know what I mean? Which is most of the reason why they don't do what we do. Because they don't want to go through that. You know, the most feared thing, the number one fear of man is public speaking, and second is death.
Yeah.
It's even more fearful than death itself.
Yeah.
But we love it. I mean, honestly, dude,
Yep.
I don't know what it is. It's just awesome. The feeling of exhilarating, exhilaration to go up there and try to get everybody going. You got your game plan together. I bet this is going to work. You just want to go see if it does. And then when it does work, you just start broadening your set, and it gets longer and longer. Comedian Naz also said this to me yesterday, and this was before we came on live, but he said, Maurice, I'll tell you right now, if somebody wants to work for me and they've only been doing comedy for a year and a half and they say they've got 45 minutes, I mark them off immediately.
Yeah. Yep.
It's because it's not that simple.
Right.
You might have 45 minutes, but it's probably all bad if you haven't been in this thing for a while.
Yeah, I agree. So many times, going back to the open mic things, you get young guys that'll come up and say, well, you have any suggestions or, advice and that kind of thing. But so often you get, well, I'd love to come out and do a show with you. I can do a half an hour. Oh, okay. Because I only saw 5 minutes tonight. But so how long you've been doing this?
Yeah.
Oh, about a year or so. And I think you don't have a half an hour. If you think you have a half an hour, go back and reassess, because it's just not there.
It's not there.
Yeah.
You can stand there for 30 minutes and talk.
Yeah.
Jerry Seinfeld said, what the worst thing you could do is to take control of an entire room and not be funny. Now people are angry.
Yeah. Because
you're taking up my valuable time right now. You're making me listen to you and you have nothing to say.
Yeah. It's doing a lot of corporate stuff. So often you're part of the entertainment at a convention or something like that. Well, these people are paid to interact with each other. They're there to network and be, to see the vendors and things like that. The comedy is a nice little break from it, but that's not why they're there. So if you're going to take up an hour and a half of their time, you better deliver some entertainment, because you're right. They get upset. They're irritated. And now nothing's going to work because you've, displayed a disrespect for their time, if you will. And, I'm not saying you have to kill every time, but if you're somebody that is stepping in over their head and trying to do, hey, I can come and do this event for you, and you really don't have the chops, then you've really done a disservice. Now, having said that too, I've oftentimes walked away from those events thinking maybe I should refund their money because it didn't go well. But at the same time, you have to remember it is a risky thing. I've had people that, firemen, policemen, everybody else come up to me and say, man, what you do, I don't have the guts for that, which cracks me up. Or even I've had a guy who's a base jumper. He's well known for doing base jumping. Man, I don't know how you have the guts for that. Going up there in front of people. I think you're a base jumper. You think I have guts? But I get it. It's just a fear people have. And I don't know.
Well, it comes down to integrity, character, self-esteem. Those things are huge for a human being. We all want to be respected. We all want to be liked. They're huge for the human character. Huge. And if it's devastating when that need is not met. The feeling of human or social rejection is devastating for a human being.
It is.
And so that's why people don't do that. Take the chances that we do. And you can be a singer, you can be in a play, you can be an actor, you can be in a rock group, you can be a poet, you can be a lot of different things. A musician, but a stand-up comic is another level.
It really is.
It's all about your self-esteem, squarely, front and center, being put on the line. And if you fail that test, it's hard to come back from for any human being. But the way that we're wired, it hurts, but we love the challenge more than it hurts.
Yep. Even if we hit the rocks, we want to go back up on that bungee cord.
And yeah, the bungee cord, I love it. And it makes us better. Mike, this has been a great conversation. Before we get out of here, any advice you can leave with young people out there that want to dive into comedy for a living?
The two things I would say, one is be yourself. At least give that a shot. Try to just be honest and be yourself out there.
That's
the other one, people hate getting this advice because it's the same advice they get from everybody, but it really is true. It's all about that stage time. Get on the stages and do it. I would say one thing about that. If you're only doing these bar shows and the same open mic at the same club all the time, you really got to branch out, because that can really get you into a hole of performing a very small niche thing, and you're getting feedback based on a very limited narrow feedback. So branch out, try different places, go do different things, different stages, and really just stage time. Yep.
Absolutely. Great advice. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking with Mike James on the Maurice Brown Show. And if you've enjoyed the conversation, like it and share it and subscribe to the Maurice Brown Comedy Channel, as well as any social media engine that Mike James is a part of. And as I say that, Mike, how can fans follow you by website or on social media?
Website is mikejamescomedy.com. And I think almost all my social media is at Mike James Comedy. So you can reach me using Mike James Comedy on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or anywhere.
All right. And tomorrow about midday, if you missed this entire interview, of course, you can watch it on Facebook or YouTube today on the replay. You can also see it on the Creative Motion Network on Roku TV every Saturday night on KCHF TV in Albuquerque, New Mexico at 8 p.m. and 12 midnight. You can also see the Maurice Brown Show, specifically breaking down the four walls, and this show as well. And you can also listen on Spotify, Audible, Amazon Music, and Google Play. Once again, we've been talking with Mike James, comedian Mike James, on the Maurice Brown Show. Mike, thanks again for stopping by. This has been a great chat, my friend, and may the peace of Christ be with you and your family. God bless you.
You too, Maurice. Thanks a lot.